What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo is here, barely. And I'm here as well. I'm Bob Wankel. Good to talk to you after Game 2 of the NLCS between the Arizona Diamondbacks and Philadelphia Phillies. Anthony, I'm glad to see that you made it. I'm glad to see that you're able to get up out of bed this morning. I know it was a late one for you last night. What time did you get home last night?
It was 2 a.m.
So yeah, you had a day yesterday, and I don't want to get into the particulars of it, but it was a long day for you, right? You had a lot going on.
It was a lot going on yesterday, and Bob, more than anything, the thing that drained me more than anything yesterday was walking from the Wells Fargo Center to Citizens Bank Park. That was the hardest thing. Because I was, without getting all the particulars, I had to start off at the Flyers game, which was 2 hours before the Phillies.
Sure.
And I left the Flyers game early. And I said, I just got to walk across the parking lot and go over across the street and get into the ballpark. And I was carrying my backpack with my, computers, and, I had my mic with me and everything else. So it was a little bit heavier than normal, but nothing crazy. And the Flyers had given us a media gift. They do this every year. They give you something, right? And this year it was this box, and in the box was a nice notepad and pen, and they gave you a T-shirt and a giant bottle of vodka.
Okay.
Was part of the media pack, media gift, right? And so now I'm carrying that too, so there's a little extra, and then having to weave my way through hundreds and hundreds of cars and thousands of people. And the way that they had it all set up, that you could only cross at crosswalks. And I get it. They didn't want people jaywalking or anything, but the narrow space that they allowed people to cross through, and you had 150,000 people down there yesterday, it took 50 minutes. I put a tweet out about it. It took 50 minutes to walk from the Wells Fargo Center to the press box. That's insane.
I had to go out around 7:15 for a radio hit. And I actually left the stadium because it was just so loud. You know that there's not really a place to take that call. I didn't really want to bother the media relations guys. They looked busy. So I just said, I'm going to go out to my car and take the call. And normally there's good cell service out there. It's not a problem. But when you have 140,000 people packed into that area, it becomes a problem. So the call actually dropped out midway through. But to your point, it was an easier walk for me, but just floods of Mexico football fans. I say football as in soccer. I mean, it was crazy out there. I mean, it was absolutely wild. It was an unprecedented night down in South Philly, one that I hope we never see again, just in terms of trying to run 3 events simultaneously at all those locations.
Correct.
I mean, we were sitting there after the game last night. We do all the post-game stuff. We're talking, and you look out past center field from the press box, and you just see hundreds of cars sitting still. I said, well, I guess I'm not going to leave yet. I finally rolled the dice around 1 o'clock, got in my car, and actually was able to get over the bridge pretty quickly and back into Jersey. But what a circus that was, man.
Total. And I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And I've been down there for a lot of crazy events, right? I've been down there for a lot of, even Eagles stuff that, it has gone on at the same time as something else. And you're like, well, what the hell are they thinking, putting something up against an Eagles game, especially with all the tailgating and everything. And it's happened before. And, they've had 3 events in the same day, 2 going on simultaneously and then 1 at night. And so there's a lot of traffic as some people are leaving and others are coming in. So this kind of thing has happened, but not to this degree. This was the most unbelievable and hopefully the only time I ever experience being in a situation like that, because there was an announcement at one point, Bob, that every available parking spot in the entirety of the sports complex was full. There was not an open parking spot for anyone.
Well, now that we spent 4.5 minutes doing the woe is us sports writers' plight of trying to navigate the complex, I guess we can get into what we're actually supposed to be talking about, which is Phillies just absolutely whooping ass last night. 10-0 over the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
I guess the question that I have for you right off the jump here is, did the Phillies break the will of the Arizona Diamondbacks last night? Is this series over?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, keep in mind, I was of the mindset that it was over before it started. But last night, you saw it. You absolutely saw the difference. They kind of thought they were going to come in here and be prepared for what they were about to face. And maybe in your head, like you kind of told yourself that you're not going to, be affected by Red October or anything like that. And as great as the fans have been, and they've been fantastic, it wasn't even that environment that got to the Diamondbacks. The Phillies just imposed their will upon the Diamondbacks. And it's almost like those games could have been played, on an island, right? Like, with no one there, the Phillies would have still murdered them in the way that they did. They just went out there and smacked them around yet again. 2 huge innings where they batted around, back-to-back innings that really kind of put the game away. It was close. I mean, Merrill Kelly, to his credit, did a nice job first 5 innings of the game, right?
Yeah, he did a nice job. And, after the game, Rob Thompson actually talked about that. Hey, Merrill Kelly threw the ball really well. And you said it, 5 innings. He only gives up the 2 runs, the 2 solo homers. Otherwise, he was pretty effective. So I know that when we look back on this series, we'll say like, oh, the crowd got to Merrill Kelly. Sorry, crowd, on this one. I don't think the crowd actually impacted Merrill Kelly. I actually thought he navigated that fairly well. He made 2 mistakes, 2 runs over 5 innings. Now he gets into the 6th, and then the Phillies started to bear down and get to him. But I thought overall he actually threw the ball fairly well. He turned in a decent start. The rest of his team didn't show up. The Phillies outscored the Diamondbacks last night 10-0. Across the 6th and 7th innings, they scored 8 runs on 8 total hits, mix in a couple walks. They struck out 13 times, the Diamondbacks did, and they were out hit 11-4 in the game. It was a total beatdown. And then in the 7th inning, you see the Bryson Stott pop-up go up, the miscommunication on the Arizona infield. One of the things that we talk about is how fundamentally sound they are and how well they played defensively. And then you're starting to see those issues. I don't think there's any way that you can say after watching 2 games down there this week that the Diamondbacks were not either impacted by the environment to some degree, because I think the rest of the team was, even if Kelly wasn't. And then certainly, as you said, the Phillies just imposed their will. It's very clear who the better team is here. And I know it's baseball, and I know that we can throw out all these disclaimers like it's a long series, anything can happen. In 1954, this team came. That's great. And it could happen, I guess. But the Phillies are the better team here. And when you consider the way that they're playing, what Arizona looks like, the fact that Arizona is kind of a fraud to begin with, this series feels over to me. It feels like it's not coming back to Philadelphia. And maybe I'm wrong, but it sure as hell doesn't feel that way.
No, it's not. And there's no way that this Arizona team is going to suddenly win 2 out of 3 in Arizona. And even if they did, Bob, which I think would be somewhat surprising, but even if they did, do you honestly think they're coming back here and winning again? Like win 2 more here? If you go 2-1 at home in Arizona, are you coming back to Philadelphia and winning 2 games in this ballpark? No. Like the series at 2-0 is over. And it's over because the Phillies are just bludgeoning everybody. I mean, I have some stuff that, I want to statistically that you want to talk about, that like this offense is so good right now. It's historic. Like it's doing things that no team in the history of the sport has ever done in the playoffs. And you even put out a tweet yesterday about their OPS.
Yeah.
It's like, which is unbelievable as a team. Was it 964?
Yeah, so this postseason, the Phillies are hitting 284 as a team with a 366 on-base percentage and a 941 OPS.
941, that's what it was.
I mean, honestly, like you look at that 1 through 9, take the entire cumulative lineup production. They're producing as a unit like an MVP player. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. I mean, that's like a top 6 or 7 OPS in baseball this past regular season. And that's what they're doing 1 through 9. And you can't start picking apart different things and saying, well, if you remove this guy from it, but like, in all honesty, if you remove Johan Rojas from that, like, it's probably over 1,000. I mean, it's insane. So, I mean, what they're doing right now from an offensive standpoint is unbelievable. And one thing that I'll say to you is that, and I want to lead with Nola. Like, I really do want to get to him because I thought he was the story last night. But one thing I'll say to kind of contextualize what's going on with this lineup right now Trey Turner is hitting 500 this postseason. He has a 1.526 OPS. That's like otherworldly, all-time stuff, right? Like all-time great type stuff. And he's just like one of the guys in this lineup right now. It's like, yeah, he's nice job. Yeah, he's doing really well. But like in almost any other situation, we would be fixated on what he's accomplished this postseason. And instead, it's like, yeah, we should probably get to Trey Turner. Let's mix him in too. Make sure that we talk about what he's doing, because you have so many different guys that are playing out of their minds right now. I mean, it's crazy to see how many of these guys are all rowing in the same direction at the same time.
It's amazing. It's amazing to think that a guy can be putting up those kind of numbers. We were sitting there talking about his on base percentage at the game last night, and like marveling at the notion.
56% of the time this postseason.
Yeah, it's like right? That's hard, right? I mean, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, I don't know. I don't. Maybe I don't watch enough baseball, but like,
imagine if he could field a ground ball. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? And we're marveling at that, and yet it's kind of like not even a story, Bob. It's not even a story. Trey Turner's not even a
yeah, he's like 5th on my power rankings of Phillies narratives right now. I mean, it's truly crazy when you think about it.
It's unreal right now. Like, what is happening? What is going on? They're just doing things that this is what's so different about 23 versus 22. Like 22 was fun because it was unexpected, but there was also a lot more uncertainty and anxiety and is this going to, everything was so edge of your seat. The Phillies basically taken that out of the equation. You know how many guys have batted in a game in this postseason with the Phillies trailing in the game?
How many Phillies have batted this postseason?
How many Phillies have batted in a game with the Phillies trailing?
3.
6.
Okay, so the 9th inning of game 2.
Yes, and then they were behind 1-0.
Okay,
twice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
6 batters in 8 games have come to the plate with the Phillies trailing in the game.
It's pretty wild stuff. We looked at this season and said it's going to be tough for them to replicate it because, and we know they're battle tested, and we know that they have all of these bright light players, and Aaron Nola is just not Aaron Nola though. Like, you can't run back this same formula, even with a better bullpen and the experience and Trey Turner added to the mix. If Aaron Nola doesn't work here, this whole thing doesn't work. And guess what? Aaron Nola is making it work in October. And I know, and I know you have a story coming out about this, and I'm sure you'll point out that this really goes back further than what we've just seen this month. But
yeah,
I mean, another 6 scoreless innings last night. Again, I think that it's almost like an embarrassment of riches to a degree. He probably could have come back out for the 7th. In fact, after the game, Rob Thompson said he would have come back out for the 7th, but it was such a long delay because the Phillies were just pummeling the Diamondbacks into submission. So he goes 6 innings. He has a .96 ERA in 3 postseason starts. And I don't know if you want to talk about big picture, what this means for his legacy, what it means for him next year, what it means right now. But all I know watching him pitch is that he is in complete and total control. We talk about all of the home runs that he gave up over 32 regular season starts. He hasn't given up a home run this postseason. He's been nearly flawless. What a remarkable and timely turnaround from Aaron Nola.
Well, it's really interesting, Bob, because it actually goes back a little bit further. And this is what my story is about, and it should be up by the time people are hearing this. So Google Crossing Broad, you can find it. But it actually, in the last 12 starts for Aaron Nola, the Phillies are 11-1. That goes back to August 10th. And you say, wow, geez, he didn't really look that good, right? In those 12 games, 3.2, he's 6-1 himself. 3.26 ERA, 1.07 WHIP. Not bad. And that includes a game in Milwaukee, which I'm going to get to in a second, where he got clobbered. It was absolutely his worst start of the year. It was the most earned runs he had allowed. He gave up 7 earned runs in 4 2/3 innings, the most earned runs he had allowed in a calendar year. And if you take that one bad start out, which I don't want to take out because it's important because it's something, there's something about it. But if you do take it out, in the 11 victories that the Phillies have had, is 11 of his last 12 starts. 2.52 ERA, 0.979 WHIP. This isn't just something that came about the last 2 starts of the regular season. Even though Rob Thompson said, "Oh yeah, the last 2-3 starts," well, it actually goes back further than that. I actually had an opportunity to talk to Aaron after he did his big media scrum, and then I pulled him aside and had him for a one-on-one for a few questions, where we kind of dove into this a little bit. And he talked about that Milwaukee start. He said, it was a weird start because he actually said he felt good. And he got the Brewers just hit him all over the place. He gave up 8 hits, 3 walks, another home run. Carlos Santana had a 3-run homer in that game off him. And he couldn't quite understand what was going on. And that's when he started to look at the video of it, and he realized there was something mechanical that was off. And he and Caleb Cotham sat down. They started working on it. What do they had to do? And it just became a thing of repetition of his delivery had gotten bad. It's very inside baseball conversation, right? About like what physically was slightly off, but he needed to kind of be more square to the plate. Needed to change his stride towards home a little bit more. He was kind of off. He was talking about how his glove side, which was always kind of like his check mark, was off, and that he was everything was arm side, and so all his pitches need him to be more glove side in order to be effective. And one of the things that he ended up doing, Bob, to kind of fit, and it's poetic in a lot of ways, considering who the guy is and how this season has gone. But the pitch clock helped Aaron Nola. And I don't know if you know this, but so being right-handed, he tends to look at the pitch clock on the third base side, right? Because it's the one you're facing. Okay. Well, what he did as part of this mechanical adjustment to kind of retrain himself, because he added a slide step in back. He hasn't done that since 2017. He re-added that back in with runners on base. So that was part of it as well. And there's other little tinkering things. But one little tiny thing, not to say that this was the cure-all, but instead of focusing at the third base pitch clock, he looked at the pitch clock on the first base side. It kept his body more square to home plate because he would look at it over his shoulder a little bit. So it would keep, I guess, just the physical nature of it.
Sure.
Right. And that helped him get that stride back to where it needs to be. And then now all of a sudden the pitches his curveballs got more break. His changeups got more drop to it. His 2-seamer runs a little bit better. Like all of his pitches start working better, all because of like just the ability to keep his body going in the same spot over and over and over again. And one tiny little mind's eye optical change was look at a different pitch clock.
And all of that is added up to him giving up 2 earned runs in 18 2/3 innings this postseason. He's allowed 14 base runners in 18 2/3 innings pitch, a 0.75 WHIP.
Yeah. How about this one, Bob? You ready for this? Aaron Nola's got 8 career postseason starts. In half of them, he's allowed 0 earned runs and pitched at least 6 innings. Only one other player in the history of baseball has ever done that, and it's a guy named Waite Hoyt, who last pitched in 1938. I mean, he's a big game pitcher, man. Yeah. That's all there is to it. He just is.
Yeah. I think that he has another 5, 6, 7 years in his career here, maybe more. And maybe it's possible that we all rush to judgment on what he was and his ability to handle the big moment a little too soon into his career. It's like sometimes I think we rush to anoint certain players in the city as the next guy, Mr. It, whether it was Carson Wentz or, Ben Simmons, or hopefully we're not saying the same thing about Jalen Hurts 3 years from now, or at least I hope I'm not. I know that you're Mr. 49er and all, but this might be a case where we did the opposite and, said, oh, he's not it. He's not him, Anthony.
Yeah.
And maybe he is him. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, by the way, for people that aren't looking at my face as I say this on YouTube. I mean, yeah, he's been money. You talk about pitching him into the postseason with the clinchers in the regular season the past 2 years. You talk about what he was able to do early on last postseason, what he's done through 3 starts this postseason. And I mean, listen, they still have to win this series. He's going to take the ball in the World Series. He was not good in the World Series last year. There is no question about it. And if this team now, with all the expectations, they are now favored to win the World Series, I think by both experts and odds makers. If he goes out and has a bad performance in the World Series, you know that we're going to open up this case again and we're going to relitigate it and we're going to continue to talk about what he is and what do you do. But I think if you can not be so bound to the moment and step back and just look at the big picture here and realize what he's done for this team and the numbers that he's produced with such consistency and now has delivered a number of big time postseason moments. I don't know how you look at him and say, like, this is a guy that I don't want on my team moving forward. Like, how could you? And it puts the Phillies in an interesting predicament.
Yeah.
Because they were reportedly far, far apart in their contract negotiations leading up to this season. And I don't want to talk about the big picture beyond the immediate here too much, but he has certainly undone the struggles of the regular season with these performances. Like, there's no question. And we've sort of said this, just kind of knowing the industry and knowing market value, that if the Phillies weren't going to pay Aaron Nola, somebody else probably was going to, even with a subpar 23. But now when you look at what he's doing in the postseason, being a part of this run, there are multiple teams that are going to be very interested in his services. And I know he wants to be here. I believe him when he says that. And I'm sure that the Phillies would like him here. But are they going to open up the wallet and say, yeah, we can't let you go? And if they do let him go, they better have one hell of a plan B, because this window should not close after 23. And it will if they only have Zack Wheeler and a bunch of guys that love Ranger Suarez. I'm going to talk about how much I love Ranger Suarez in a few minutes, but you need another killer at the top of your rotation. And right now, didn't think I'd say this because I've been critical of him. Aaron Nola is a certified killer. Quite a predicament.
I love hearing that from you, Bob. I love hearing that from you.
You got to call it what it is. I mean, listen, there's been so many ups and downs with him. He came in and was supposed to be kind of like the hope. When things were at their bleakest and at their darkest, he was supposed to be the guy that could help drag them out of this. And to some degree, he did. He got them back to respectable. He had great seasons, great starts, great runs, but they were always intertwined with disappointment and stretches of disappointment and inconsistencies that you felt like he should be better than or above at a certain point in his career. And like, let's be honest, like, he was disappointing in the World Series last year. He was disappointing in the NLCS. He was horrible. I thought he was flat out horrible this year. I really did. I know that there are some peripherals that say, like, he was better than you think, and here's why he's still valuable, and he eats innings. And I get all that. I do. But the expectation for what he's supposed to be versus what he was, it was a true disappointment. But I love guys that can fight through adversity. I love guys that show that they have some stones. And for him to rise to the occasion down the stretch when they absolutely fucking had to have it, for him to do that, dude, hats off to him. Like, I truly, it changes my entire feel and view of what he is. I mean, that's about as fucking tough as it gets, man. It really is.
I mean, you know that I'm someone who's always felt, you know, that Nola is a top of the rotation guy and will continue to be a top of the rotation guy wherever he is, whether it's here or somewhere else. So it's nice to kind of hear that, right? I mean, because it's like, you know, there were times this year where I will honestly admit, I'm just like, did I misread it with this guy? Yeah. Like, you know, I questioned it. I questioned my thought on it at times too. But there was always something that you know, and just in talking to him and listening to other people talk about him, that kind of validated it for me. I'm like, okay, well, I still think this guy's going to figure it out at some point. And not only did he figure it out, Bob, he's been, like you said, he's been a stone cold killer. And I guess the question is, and you know, we're going to really dive into it in a couple weeks, because it's that, you know, as exciting a time as it is right now with the Phillies,
it comes fast, doesn't it?
You're 6 wins away from a world championship. Even with that and a potential parade, days later, Aaron Nola is a free agent. And so we're really within 2 weeks of that happening. What do you do if you're the Phillies? Like, what kind of investment are you willing to make? Like, do you go to the numbers that he was looking for preseason? Do these 3 playoff starts and the start to pitch them into the wild card in the last week of the season, are they enough to sit there and go, okay, yeah, I guess we should give him that kind of money? Or do you still have a ceiling and say it's either that or, if you don't take it, we'll find it somewhere else?
I don't think it should be about financial commitment. I think it should be about, do we think we can upgrade beyond this? Like, do we think that we have an alternative route to getting this production that is at the same level or, frankly, is better? And if you don't have that option, and I don't know what that is, like, I'm not sure. I keep thinking, like, do they go to Corbin Burns? Like, do they go to Milwaukee and say, he doesn't want to be there, you're not going to pay him, let's make it work?
Yeah,
maybe. But Corbin, like, here's something. Like, I would have said to you all day, like, yeah, give me Corbin Burns over Aaron Nola, right? Like, I would have signed up for that in a minute. Well, what did Corbin Burns do in October? What's this guy doing in October? So, like, even that kind of makes you reevaluate everything. So, I mean, listen, you're right. It comes fast. You think you're in this and you're living by every pitch and every inning and game to game, and then all of a sudden, you snap your fingers and you've got to decide what 24 looks like real quick. And I'm sure that they are having those conversations and coming up with the if this, then that type of scenarios. But boy, it's going to be truly compelling to see how that unfolds. I want to talk about so many different things offensively and what they're doing and what happens next. But I have to give you one more thing here. I mean, this Wheeler-Nola combo has just been unbelievable. Like, we can talk about how the bullpen has been good. The whole staff has really been great in the postseason. I think Caleb Cotham's done a great job. When we talked to him after the clincher against the Braves, he credited what JT's doing behind the plate and how he's calling pitches and the sequencing and the whole production from game planning to sequencing to execution has been brilliant here through 8 games this month. 37 2/3 innings pitched between Zack Wheeler and Aaron Nola over 6 combined starts. They have a 5-0 record. They have a 1.67 ERA with a 0.69 whip, man. They have a 45-3 strikeout to walk ratio combined. It's insane what these two are doing right now. And I mean, I guess this is a good transition point to, like, looking ahead in this series. I don't know. If you're Arizona, where do you go from here? Like, maybe you have some response at home because you have some pride in game 3 and you find a way to beat Ranger Suarez, which I wouldn't bet on. But even still, knowing that you have to stare down those 2 guys again, I don't know. I don't know where you go from here.
Yeah, it's a 5-game series at best, but it just is. I mean, I look at the next 2 and say, can Arizona get one of these next 2? Maybe. I think game 4 would be even more likely than game 3 because you're probably getting Taijuan Walker, right? And not to say that the Phillies aren't going to hit whatever slop bullpen game the Diamondbacks decide to throw at them. But if there's a guy that maybe Arizona jumps on early, gets out to that lead, and is able to kind of figure out a way to hang on, I think game 4 is the one that maybe they can win. But are you beating Zack Wheeler? Are you beating Nola? Like, if it gets to 6, I don't see it. I think this is a 5-game series at best. I think that the Phillies are just going to go in there and continue to do what they've been doing because they've been doing it to everybody. And like we'll go into one of the great follows for baseball stuff online that people really should follow is Sarah Langs. You follow Sarah Langs?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, she's great. At S Langs on Sports. She puts up some great like researched data on teams and what they're doing. The Phillies have hit 19 home runs so far this postseason. They have the biggest home run differential of a team versus their opponents in playoff history. through 8 games.
How many have they allowed? 3?
4.
4. So Perdomo, Riley.
2. Riley has 2.
Darno and Riley too.
Yeah, and Darno, right? That's it. So 19-4. They've out-homered teams. They have a plus 33 run differential in 8 games, which is the highest differential in any 8-game span, not just the first 8 games, any 8-game span in the history of baseball. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's we're talking about 120 some years of baseball history, and they're pummeling teams more than anybody else. And we could go into the here's one that not a lot of people are going to think to look at. And this is why she's really good. This was Rob Thompson's 25th postseason game as a manager. He has 18 wins. That's tied for the most all time with Joe McCarthy and Casey Stengel in the first 25. I mean, think about what you're the numbers that you're putting up here. Lowest ERA in the first 8 games.
What is he? Is he 18-7? Thompson in the postseason, 7-1 this year, 11-6 last year.
Yep, 18-7. Yep. Lowest ERA in the first 8 games of a single postseason. Number 1 is the 1983 Orioles, who beat the Phillies in the World Series. 1.23 was their ERA. Number 2, the 2023 Phillies, 1.39 ERA.
Yeah, they've been awesome.
I mean, these are just unbelievable numbers that they're just doing things that have never been done in the history of this sport. How does Arizona come back from that? Like, you don't just suddenly stop doing those things if you're the Phillies.
Well, one of the things that Torey Lovullo was asked last night after the game, and sitting in that room, I know you were over in the locker room doing your thing there, but they had asked him, like, Ken, you look at how the Phillies are slugging right now in the postseason, especially in this series. They've out-homered them 6-1. Yeah. And they're like, can you win this series if you can't find a way to slug more? And he said, probably not. Like, we have to be able to slug with them. The problem for the Diamondbacks is, and I know that they got hot in the postseason, they came in with 13 home runs, which is what the Phillies had at the start of the NLCS. But like, they are not a slug team by nature. Like, they have some guys that can beat you, right? Like, we know that Walker has some pop. We know that Carroll has some pop. Like, they have some guys in that lineup. But this is not a bash you over the head type of offense. And the regular season numbers bared that out. They were bottom tier in slug. They were bottom tier in home runs for big portions of this season. That's not how this team's built. So if the Phillies are going to hit the way that they've been hitting, like, we can talk about the pitching matchups. We can talk about Suarez versus Brandon Pfaadt. We can talk about bullpen game versus Taijuan Walker, but like, if the Phillies continue to swing the bats the way that they are, and they will have advantageous pitching matchups here to do it, then it's not going to matter. I mean, if the Diamondbacks throw their best punch and the Phillies throw their best punch, the Phillies are going to win every single time. And that's really what we're looking at here. Now, I know that we're all sort of wired in a certain way. Like, I know for a fact that there are Phillies fans out there, because in deep down within, I feel this still. I know you don't, but like, there's always that, well, what can go wrong here? Like, because it's not over. It's only 2-0. Like, they're got to play the next 3 in Arizona. So like, how does this go wrong? And so, is it a day off, a reset? You get home. Ranger Suarez has been really good, but Ranger Suarez, like, he did limit in the game against the second start against Atlanta. He limited base runners. Like, he didn't put on a lot of base runners in either start against the Braves. But one of the things that Ranger Suarez had previously done was sort of work his way into and out of damage. Like, I guess I don't expect, as good as Ranger Suarez has been in the playoffs, for him to go out and throw 6 shutout innings in game 3. I don't expect the Phillies to be silenced either, but like, is there some world where the Diamondbacks show enough fight that they get one in game 3, and now all of a sudden you're throwing Taijuan Walker out there to make sure that the series doesn't get evened up at 2-2? Like, you don't want that. Like, and it can quickly happen. So, certainly game 3 is the Diamondbacks season. They're not going to win 4 in a row against the Phillies. The Phillies can effectively end the series with a win on Thursday afternoon. But like, there is a path for Arizona to get back into this, though it does feel improbable, if not impossible.
I get it. And you're not wrong. I mean, certainly they can win game 3, right? They would need a lot of things to go their way to win game 3. This is kind of weird, right? That they're in the NLCS and it's only their second home playoff game this year.
Yeah,
right? So I mean, it's kind of a strange thing, right? They had only played one home playoff game to this point. Meanwhile, the Phillies, who were also a wild card team, have played 6. It's just odd how that comes to be. But yeah, I mean, they're going to come out and know that their season's on the line and try and play like their season's on the line. And they're a right-handed lineup facing a lefty starter. The Phillies might have to kind of go the path that they went in game 1 against Atlanta in this game, just to kind of get more right-handed arms on that lineup. So I think that's a possibility that you get, Arizona gets out to that quick start and then just holds on in game 3. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, now it's a series again. I don't panic about that, Bob. Look, it's baseball, right? You're going to lose games from time to time, and you might lose a game or 2 in the playoffs. The one thing about this Phillies team that has been most impressive over the last 2 years, again, with the exception of the World Series when it didn't happen, but every time they lose a game, they come back right away and play great the next game, right? And even in the World Series, when they lost game 3, get no hit at home, it took like a couple of great defensive plays by the Astros to ensure that they win game 5 of that series, right? Because the Phillies actually played a pretty good game 5. Probably that or game 1 is, you argue, is the best game of the series, for both teams, right? Both teams playing. So yeah, like that to me is another reason why I don't worry as much. Now, if they go out to Arizona and lose game 3 and then lose game 4 and it's 2-2 all of a sudden, I'm still not worried because I know that the next 2 games are Wheeler Nola, but I'm sure there will be some consternation in the sense of,
yeah, there's a world where, hey, now it's Zach Gallen in game 5 and he's at home and he's better at home. And are they going to?
How did you let this happen, right? How did you let this team back in? That would be the consternation for me. More so, and I would still, even if that happens, Bob, even if Arizona wins 3 and 4 to tie the series at 2, I still remain supremely confident that the Phillies are going to win the series, right? I mean, so like,
can I just say this? Like, we learned last year that you aren't just going to win because of vibes. Like, we learned that against the Astros. We wondered, like, hey, we know that this Astros team is better. They're more battle tested. They have proven that they can win in this moment. The Phillies haven't. And they didn't. And that felt likely. Like, it felt possible. That's why we picked the Astros ahead of that series. I have a hard time now, as we sit here talking, imagining a scenario where this team, certainly where they don't win this series, but they don't win it all. Like, I just can't imagine this thing not ending in a parade. And I know, like, I am not the puff your chest out guy. Like, I was the guy at halftime of the Super Bowl this past year with the 10-point lead going, I don't know, man. That's my nature. But I just, where does this thing go sideways? And I know it can. It's baseball. Weird things happen. But it just feels like, if not this team, if not right now, then when?
Yeah. I mean, no, they know. They know the path is there for them. They are, in my mind, the most complete team remaining, and they should get this thing through and get there. Have us in a parade. I was joking with Dan Gelston from the Associated Press on the way out. We were walking out at 1:15, 1:20 last night, and was joking with him, and I said, hey, you going to reserve a spot on the media float for the parade? But I'm like you. I think it's going to happen, but I do understand that the matchup of the World Series is not necessarily going to be an easy one, right? I mean, either team is going to is going to pose unique challenges. But yeah, I think that this team, it just is. There's a different feel this year, Bob, than last year. It just feels different than a season ago. Like last season, you were along for a ride, and while you are along for a ride this year, it's almost like they're telling you strap in because we're going the whole way. Yeah. As opposed to last year, it was just like, this ride can stop at any time, right? Like, so like there's just a different feel to it.
Well, you know what I almost feel like in hindsight, looking at last year now, like they were Trey Turner away from winning the World Series last year. And it's almost too simple to say, look, they added a couple more high leverage relievers, a little bit more velocity in the back of the bullpen, and one true difference maker in the lineup. But that's really what they were. That was probably the difference a season ago. It probably was. And you're looking at the impact that Trey Turner's had on this team, and it's just taken everything to a different level. I mean, it really does feel like that, hey, we're going there. We're going to do this and get the hell out of our way. I mean, that really is what this feels like right now.
They're shoving. They're shoving and shoving hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you look ahead to game 3 and, talking about, should you be nervous? What can go wrong? Well, I will tell you on paper, at least, that the Phillies certainly do have an advantage coming into this game. And, I think we all know what Ranger Suarez is about in October and how successful he's been, how many big time innings and outs he's recorded and all of that. And so just to kind of reset here, in 7 postseason games, 5 starts, Ranger Suarez is a 1.16 ERA. For all these video game numbers that we're reading about Aaron Nola and Zack Wheeler, yes, they are more dominant and they've pitched more innings than Ranger Suarez. Ranger Suarez has a better ERA. He also has opponents hitting 155 against him in 23 and a third postseason innings. He has been unbelievable and really the X factor that has swung these series for the Phillies, because it's great that you have Nola and Wheeler, and they have certainly capitalized, the Phillies have, when those two throw. But man, the fact that they're able to back it up with somebody that's been so effective like Ranger Suarez has been big for this team. And so you love where they're at and what they have going out there in game 3. And then you look at what the Diamondbacks have, and they have Brandon Pfaadt. And I wrote this. We talked about it last night, late after the game. I said, I think that the one question everybody wants to know about this guy isn't necessarily, is he any good or what's he bring to the table, but how the hell do you say his last name?
Yeah.
So,
I mispronounced it on our last episode.
So you went to Baseball Reference. We saw that the pronunciation was Pfaadt. I went to YouTube and looked at his highlights to verify that. I can't lie to you. I fancy myself to be a Phillies expert. I do not fancy myself to be an MLB expert. I did not catch a lot of Diamondbacks baseball down the stretch this season. So that's how you say his name. Now, the other part of it is he any good? And if you look at his regular season numbers, you kind of come to an emphatic no. So just a couple things I want to rattle off here to you. He had a 5.72 ERA in 19 games, 18 starts this season. In 2 postseason starts, he's only pitched 7 total innings, but he has been better, a 3.86 ERA. Actually did a nice job against the Dodgers in the NLDS. Throws 5 pitches, throws about 94 with his 4-seam fastball. Opponents have gotten on his fastball this season. Like, one of the things that I pulled up when I was checking out the Baseball Savant page for him, opponents are hitting 325 with a 650 slugging percentage against his fastball per StatCast data. Opponents at Chase Field, when he pitches at home, hit 314 with an 888 OPS against them. It's pretty ugly, dude. The one thing that I can say for him is that he was better after the All-Star break. So he made 6 starts prior to the All-Star break, his first 6 starts at the major league level. He had a 9.82 ERA. Opponents hit 346 against him. He was dreadful. He was so bad that I actually can't believe that he was given the opportunity to continue to make starts after the All-Star break. I think that that's a testament to the Diamondbacks' lack of organizational depth in starting pitching, and also kind of explains why the hell they don't have a 4th starter lined up for this series, really. They just don't have a lot of options. But they hung with them, and in 13 games after the All-Star break, he had a 4.22 ERA. Opponents hit 257 against them. By no means are we facing a lights-out pitcher here in game 3. You certainly feel like the Phillies have the advantage here. Odds makers have the Phillies as a -130 favorite, which is pretty much in line with where they were at in games 1 and 2, in that they were about -160, and you take the home field advantage into the equation and all of that. So Odds makers like the Phillies here. By the way, odds makers love the Phillies to win this series. They are now minus 750, meaning you'd have to wager $750 to win 100 on the Phillies to advance to the World Series. That's a huge favorite. They're also the favorite, even over the Rangers, who lead their series 2-0 to win the World Series this year. So I guess this is all a very long-winded and informational way of saying that the Phillies should win Game 3.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that they're going to win Game 3. You did give us a reason to have that slight concern, and I think that it's a fair one. But I do think that I just don't see this lineup slowing up. I don't. Fought had a decent performance against the Dodgers, right, in the clincher of that game at home. He didn't pitch long, but when he did pitch, he did a nice job against a top heavy but still solid LA lineup. Yeah, could he do that again? I guess maybe, but the Phillies are hitting everybody right now. They hit the Marlins pitchers, they hit the Braves pitchers, they are hitting the Diamondbacks best pitchers. Like, I don't think it matters who the
yeah, I mean, they had success against Galen. It could have been worse. Probably should have been worse.
Yeah.
Probably, like we said, he actually had a nice start. They got to him a little bit in the 6th. I thought, should have blown Strider's doors off, actually, in the second game. They let him off the hook, and they got to Fried. Like, I mean, the Phillies have seen some decent pitching, even going back to the Marlins series.
Yeah.
Like we talked about,
Luzardo.
Luzardo's a tough matchup. I don't love Braxton Garrett, but Luzardo's a tough matchup for them, and they got to him. Like, the Phillies have really not given you any reason to feel like, oh, no, even against a top-tier arm. There's always those people out there that are going to say, of course, here's the guy that they should pummel and they don't. Like, go figure. How ironic. And we know baseball's a funny sport and that can happen, but there's really no reason when you look at this from an analytic standpoint and you just look at the way that they are attacking and the way that they are so dialed in that you would predict that to happen. Or you would say, yeah, this could happen and here's why. There's no reason to think that whatsoever here.
Is there anybody left in the lineup, Bob, that's not getting good swings?
No, I mean, even Alec Boehm, we talked about his struggles, but hit a couple balls hard in Game 1. I actually thought the liner to short was kind of like a little bit more humpbacky, but he was certainly robbed, with some hard contact in the bat before that in Game 1. Comes up last night. Nice drive out to center field. That ball, actually, I know people don't love expected batting average, but like that ball had an 830 expected batting average. Like that was pretty well struck baseball. And then he comes back.
Well, and the other reason why I'm not a big expected batting. It's just like in hockey, I'm not a big expected goals thing. Like, oh yeah, well, it was a good chance. That's how I look at it. I don't I need to know what the expected goals were. No, but it's more of a signal that Alec Thomas made a hell of a play to get back on that ball. Because off the bat, we thought if it's not out, it's reaching the wall. And Alec Thomas had a great break on that ball to get back on it. So that I think that adds to that expected batting average, is that it was a really good defensive play. Yeah.
And then he obviously finally gets the hit late in the game, and you kind of wonder, like, okay, now he can take a deep breath and say, all right, I too contributed offensively. So his swings have looked a little bit better. And you go up and down the lineup, and I kind of like, I'm not trying to be like a jerk here or anything, but I don't care that Johan Rojas isn't hitting, or I don't want to say he can't hit, but he certainly regressed a little bit here this postseason in terms of his offensive production. So, I mean, Bryson Stott, I still don't feel like he's totally in that peak rhythm, but they're all going right now. They really are.
2 hits last night.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's kind of working his way through it. But I mean, you're right. I mean, up and down the lineup, I mean, you just feel like, where's the tough out? And it does validate sort of all of the drooling that we would do back in the spring, and that everybody would do when you looked at this lineup on paper and you talked about the depth. And, I would use words like relentless and where's the easy out. And every time someone steps into the batter's box, you're like, Jesus Christ, like, I got to go get this guy now. And they're doing that really for the first time all season, all at the same time. And what a time to do it. They are lethal right now. I mean, you almost look at like last night, you're like, who's the guy that sort of had the down night? It was Castellanos.
Yeah. And he had an RBI.
Yeah. Go figure, and So it's pretty crazy. I mean, the bar is so high right now that you're like, oh, you only had a sack fly? Like, you know, you didn't hit another 3 balls, 105 miles an hour, 2 of which went over the fence. Like, what's
I
going
know.
on, you know?
I know. It's crazy.
So, I mean,
It's crazy.
that's where we're at here. So, I don't know if you have anything else you want to hit on. I'm actually that kind of wrapped it for me. I don't know if you have a
Yeah,
one
no,
last
I
thing
typical one last thing from around baseball, and one that we could have gotten to yesterday, but I had 2 others that I put ahead of it. So I'm going to get to this one today. What was your take and your surprise on what happened down in Miami with Kim Ng declining her option as the GM for the Marlins? And really the story, just in case anybody missed it. So Kim Ng, who is the first female general manager in Major League Baseball, got the Marlins to the playoffs, put together a pretty solid team, made a couple of savvy moves at the deadline for veterans that helped that team, and got them into the postseason. She had a mutual option on her contract and decided not to pick up that option because Miami ownership wants to hire a president of baseball operations above her. What do you make of that? Like, it just kind of floors me and surprises me that you have an organization that doesn't have a great history of winning. Yes, they have 2 world titles, but those were like buy everybody and then sell them off the next year kind of championships. That is kind of gone through this patient building of this team, and she does a really nice job to get them in position to win and get into the playoffs. And then all of a sudden you go, hey, thanks, we're going to bring in somebody over your head now.
Yeah, not only did they want to bring in somebody over her head, but they declined, according to The Athletic, to give her a 3-year extension, which is pretty much like standard practice when you have a GM that's doing a good job and you want to kind of give them a vote of confidence. So there was no extension offered, at least not one that she found to be, representative of the job that she did. And you want to then bring in somebody over top of her to kind of undermine her after they had such a successful season. You really feel like, wow, this team, listen, the Braves are the Braves and the Phillies are going to spend, and the Mets are this mega team in terms of what they're going to be able to do financially moving forward. And they go out and they bring in Stearns. And I think that there's some optimism that the Mets are going to one day not be a dumpster fire, which I would think is going to happen eventually if you keep spending like that. So then you have this little engine that could, and she was sort of the architect of it. And you kind of wonder, like, damn, the Marlins might be like a force to be reckoned with what they're building down there. And then this happens, and you go, no, like, poverty franchise. Like, it's embarrassing. It's a bad look considering, you're talking about that, what she represented, not just even being like the first female executive at that level, but the fact that she was really good,
Yeah.
And to not make that work, like the optics, like the Marlins can have their reasons and maybe they feel good about this and say, we're going to be better off for it. And that maybe, but when you sit here from this perspective, you say that's embarrassing that they didn't give her that contract extension. They wanted to bring, I mean, how the hell do you rationalize that? So it's kind of like same old shit with the Marlins. It sort of feels like.
Yeah. I'm going to be curious. I agree with you 1,000%. It's a bad look for the Marlins. Really, really a bad move in my mind. I'm really going to be interested to see where she ends up, because I think that if she ends up in an organization that's willing to spend money, that she could be.
Is there
it
any
could
link?
Be an incredibly successful general manager.
Is there any link to her and Boston?
Yeah, there's been a couple people talking about Boston as a spot that she could end up replacing Chaim Bloom. And if that's a spot that she goes, I think that there's but the only thing with you look at Boston and it's like, all right, well, Boston's going to have to, if they're going to have like a Phillies type situation with Baltimore, because the Orioles are going to be the Braves of the American League East.
Yeah,
they're young and talented, and they're going to be really good. And they've got they don't have great ownership, but they have a good management. And I think that they're going to be right in the mix for several years. And so you're going to compete with that. Plus, there's always the Yankees juggernaut, and there's always, money wise. And then there's always, the Blue Jays have some talent, and the Rays are the Rays. It's a wildly good division year in and year out. But I think that that's a good spot for her. I think that that would be a really cool place to see someone like Kim Ng maybe, show her chops that she has to compete with the big boys on a yearly basis.
I hear you on that front. All right. Well, listen, that will do it for the latest episode or edition of Crossed Up. We will be back on Friday morning. Yeah, Friday morning. Yeah, game
Friday
3, 5:07 start time on Thursday.
Which works for me, Bob, because there's a Flyers game Thursday night at home that I have to work.
Oh, there you go.
Get to see most of the Phillies game. Probably I'll watch the last couple innings from the arena, but works out that it's a 5 o'clock start, not an 8 o'clock start.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll be back on Friday morning after game 3. Thank you for listening to Crossed Up. If you're new, we actually are seeing quite a few new listeners pick up here, obviously, with everything going on. So hopefully you stick around and continue to listen in the future. You can follow us on Twitter, Anthony at AnSamPhilly. You can follow me at Bob_Wankel. Follow the show account at UpPhillies. You can also check us out on YouTube and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And we'll talk to you soon.